Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome back to the Raid Starter Pack. We're continuing with the Dungeon Deep Dive series, and we'll be focusing on the Spider's Den for this video. Just like with the previous entry on the Dragon's Lair, this is meant to help those of you more in the early and the mid game understand how the dungeon works, what good strategies you can use to beat it if it's your first time trying to beat it, and also understand what the end game looks like, late game, end game looks like in terms of team compositions. So without further ado, let's dive into the Spider's Den. Now, the Spider's Den is definitely one of the most important dungeons to farm. One, because that is where you get all of your accessories, so your rings, your amulets, and your banners, but also it's what really starts to push your account and push your builds further, because you have access to accuracy resistance banners to get your stats up. You get extra speed on banners, you get extra stats, crit damage, HP defense, etc., accuracy resistance on the amulets, and then the rings will just give you general stats overall. Spider can often be a roadblock to progression, particularly in the early game if you're limited on champions, but you also definitely need it in order to get those accessories that I mentioned in order to really progress your account. Otherwise, your stats are going to suffer as a result of that. Spider is one of the simplest bosses in the game, but also can be one of the most frustrating if you just can't get a team to work properly. So looking at the boss guide here, let's go over her abilities really quickly. There's really only a couple that are actives. So we have Stupefying Silk, the A2, shall we call it, which is just an AoE attack that can reduce turn meter and it can place asleep. But that's usually not the case, because usually your turn meter is not fully depleted unless you happen to just take a turn. And then the A1 is another AoE that can do additional damage if you're under poisons. But that's not really what makes the Spider annoying. The main thing is this passive here, where it's very, very important to understand how this works. The Spider is not alone. She spawns up to 10 Spiderlings, and she will always spawn Spiderlings if it's not a full board of Spiderlings every time someone gets a turn, including herself. And if you do not deal with these Spiderlings in some way, shape, or form, when she takes a turn, she will consume all of them, and she will heal herself massively for each of the spiders that she consumes. Now, I will take a moment here to note that she is immune to heal reduction, so the debuff will not work. It cannot land on her, so you cannot prevent the heal, at least with a debuff per se, but you can prevent it through other means. So when you're first starting out with Spider, and this is the type of team you're going to be running all the way probably up through stage 13 and into 16, is basically as many AoEs as you possibly can. You don't really have to worry about the boss hitting you too hard, and as long as you're killing the Spiderlings consistently, she won't have a big massive heal. She'll just have small heals, and over time, just dealing AoE damage to the Spiderlings, you're going to deal damage to her, the boss, and you're going to kill her over time. So just like with the Dragon's Lair, we have a pretty simplistic comp here. Again, this is meant to be when you're first starting out, you're first progressing, and we have the same starter champions. We have whatever your starter is. In this case, mine was Kale. We have our War Maiden that we picked up from the campaign. We have Apothecary, who we hopefully got from mystery shards or ancient shards, and then we have Reliquary Tender if you can get her from voids, but any cleanser healer would do if you happen to pick something up. And then I'm using Elhain as a proxy here for some other AoE nuking champion. It doesn't really matter who it is, as long as it could be whoever you happen to pull if it's a better champion than a rare. But in this case, I'm just showing you with a rare champion to emphasize the early game nature of this. Let's go ahead and see this team in action. It's pretty simplistic, as we kind of gone over. We have a debuffer and War Maiden, but well, I guess I'll preface this by saying, or reiterating once again, that I am in the end game, and so I have fairly end game builds on these champions, even though they are rare. So they definitely have the firepower, as you can see, to just repeatedly kill all the Spiderlings. And you might not be able to do that in just one shot, like I am able to do here. So just keep that in mind. If you're just starting out, you're not going to have this level of gear. But nonetheless, the strategy is the same, where you just want to bring in as many champions with as many AoEs as possible. Now, you probably, if you've been paying attention or watching other creators, you know that later game Spiders, where we really start to incorporate turn meter reduction and stuff like that, and that will come into play as we progress. But for this, it really doesn't matter as much, and as long as you consistently use AoEs, you can just kill the Spiderlings. She's not going to do much damage to us. This is a fairly early stage, and these champions are not built tanky by any means. We do have decreased attack occasionally from Reliquary Tender. We're doing such a low stage, I didn't build her with accuracy, and we're going to go over the builds for these champions at the end. But decreased attack will help. You take less damage if the Spider gets, or when the Spider gets a turn. But again, the priority here is just AoE, 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 and just keep killing them. And over time, you're going to also do damage to the main Spider herself, and then she will eventually die. All right, so we're coming here to the end of the run. It's going to be somewhere in the 2-minute domain. And again, we're just using a cacophony of AoEs to kill the Spiderlings. I will also mention that there is a turn in between where she consumes the Spiderling, so you don't have to worry about that every single turn. It's every other turn. So if you let her heal once, you have 2 more of her turns before you have to worry about her healing again. So you can take full advantage of that with your team. Once you have a team team set up like that, you can start to move on once you get better champions and or better gear. You start to get accessories for your champions, etc. You can start progressing towards stage 16, where you can start dropping off of getting mystery shards and uncommon gear and stuff like that. And the strategy does not really change. You still want to bring as many AoE champions, but again, your roster should be improving with time, so you can have better nukers, better AoE nukers, or more consistent AoE nukers to bring into your team. But the next milestone we want to highlight here is definitely stage 20, which is a huge staple of farming or your spider farming journey. And again, the main thing to note here is that we drop off 4-star gear and we're exclusively getting 5-star and 6-star, which is great. And stage 20 is still one of the most energy efficient stages to do relative to getting points in dungeon divers and dungeon tournaments. And so it is still a great place to go for quick farming, for quick challenge tournaments and stuff like that. So this is the team I have to show for stage 20. Again, this is more when you're approaching the mid game. You've developed some champions. You have Syl of the Drakes, perhaps. You have an AoE HP burn champion like Mordecai, for example. It doesn't have to be Mordecai, it can be anyone, but he is affinity friendly. You have some sort of protection champion, because in this case our strategy has changed from just all-out AoEs to now we want to utilize the presence of all those spiderlings to use HP burn, because we get you spread the damage out when there's multiple enemies or instances of HP burn out, as you'll see. And then our primary focus is staying alive, so we have some protection champion, which can be CC or some sort of shielding, which we have Miscreated Monster for. And then we have 2 champions, Armiger and Syl the Drakes, as well as Mordecai's A1, I think. Well, Tyrell. 4 champions, sorry. 4 champions that have some form of turn meter control, epics, and an uncommon. And so we're controlling the main spider's turn meter to keep her from taking turns, but we want all of the spiderlings to keep taking their turns so that they can start burning and deal damage to the main boss. Let's go ahead and see this team in action as well. So one thing I do want to highlight here is that the option of having a debuffer in this style of composition is kind of, well, optional, because you don't necessarily need to deal damage to the spiderlings. In fact, you don't really want to do that. You want to keep them alive as long as possible, because again, their job is to stand there and apply burns to the main spider, and you want to ensure that you are controlling the turn meter of the spider, the main spider, so that she does not take a turn, so that she cannot consume them and heal herself. Obviously, stuff like the Evil Eye Mastery will come into play as far as helping you get a couple of extra turn meter reductions on a couple of A1s at the start, but you can see here just the power of the protection champion we're using in this case, Miscreated Monster. He does have a 3-turn duration shield on a 3-turn cooldown, which means it basically stays up the entire time, provided he is fast enough to do so. In this case, I didn't make him the fastest on the team. Probably should have done that. But Mordecai taking some damage. He is negative affinity for this stage, but that's not a problem because we do have Syl of the Drakes in there to revive. And there we go. We also have Miscreated Monster to reapply the shield. So if I had to critique this team that I just threw together, I would definitely speed tune it such that Miscreated Monster goes first. That way he's protecting Mordecai. We don't have to worry about him dropping like that necessarily, because he'll always be under the shield. So again, noting here that we have a bunch of champions that do have decreased turn meter on their A1. Decreased speed is also very useful. So decreased speed is on Syl of the Drakes in this case, on her A1. And note that we're not really using her AoE attack. Same thing with Tyrell. Again, we don't want to deal a bunch of damage to the spiderlings. We just want to use all of our abilities to control the turn meter on the main spider. And in this case as well, Tyrell is useful because he does have decreased attack on the A1. So if you get a bunch of resists, you don't have enough accuracy for the dungeon stage, or anything like that happens, then we don't have to worry about the main spider doing a bunch of damage to us and blowing through the shield prematurely. The spiderlings will do some damage to whoever is going to be the weakest link, or in this case, negative affinity Mordecai. But again, the shield or protection champion helps provide cover for that. So a couple more burns. Oh, actually, there's no burns out right now. But whenever Mordecai gets a turn, we should be able to reapply HP burn. Again, this is a team I threw together. Didn't really worry about or think too much about speed tuning it per se. And so it's not perfectly in sync as far as getting a fast run. You could do a little more work to make sure that happens. But a couple more burns out there and we should be able to get this stage done in just over 2 minutes. In this case, where I'm emulating more of your first approach to getting to stage 20, we didn't bring in champions like a Coldheart, who's obviously great for this, turn meter reduction, as well as a bigger enemy max HP hit than Armiger, stuff like that, other champions. We didn't bring those in just because, again, this is meant to be your first look at stage 20, so a team comp like this is good enough to get it done. It is on the slower side, but it will get it done, and that's all you really care about when you're starting to progress. But obviously, as you get to better and better champions who can do this a lot faster, then you want to bring in more decreased defense, weakened champions, enemy max HP, whatever you got, stuff like that, Royal Guards, Cold Hearts, Husks, all those things and the like. So all of the champions can start to come in to make this even faster. Like I said, Spider is one of the fastest dungeons in the game. So now let's take a look at what late game Spider looks like, highlighting stage 25. The strategy is still the same. We want AoE HP burn, we want some form of control, and we want to bring in enemy max HP and or turn meter control just to control the Spider's turn meter whilst being able to burn the Spiderlings. Once you start to go past stage 20 for all of the core dungeons, all of the bosses have a cap to enemy max HP hits of 10%, so you cannot be above that. And as you can see here, we once again don't have a debuffer on the team. It's not necessary. You're going to hit the cap pretty easily if you have a well-built enemy max HP champion. And also the turn meter reduction effects are reduced by half, so keep that in mind. You're not going to be able to fully deplete the Spider's turn meter anymore. It's going to be 50% if it's a 100% depletion. So this is once again a pretty bare bones form of what it can look like. Obviously, if you have a better HP burner than Mordecai, feel free to use it. If you have a better control champion than Achak, then use that as well. But again, we have the HP burn from Mordecai, we have the AoE freeze from Achak the Wenderin, and then we have 2 cold hearts in here, enemy max HP, turn meter control, and then we have our budget reset champion here with a renegade. So 3 void rares and 2 epics, but you can scale this appropriately to whatever champions you have on your account by the time you get to this stage. So let's go ahead and take a look at this team in action. We got a tiny taste of enemy max HP in the previous stage with Armiger, but now we're going to see the real full potential, full power of that. So you can see there, that's the 10% cap, the 707,000 or whatever. So we want to come in there, get our nukes off. We have cold hearts in here ready to slam, and we also have a bunch of HP burn ready to go. So we have the reset. One of my cold hearts is in a reflex build. That's why she went so soon with the second heart seeker. But the second one is in a different set, so she's going to have it back right there. And then whilst that is going on, we just sit there and wait. They've already done their job as far as the cold hearts are concerned. And we just sit there and wait while the Spiderlings are frozen and they burn. And slowly but surely, in a few more seconds here, it should be under a minute, we get these main Spider dead. So this is a pretty quick and fast comp, once again highlighting that Spider is definitely one of the fastest dungeons. Renegade dying, not a big deal. We don't really care. She did her job. She sacrificed her HP and did the reset for the team, and that's all that really matters. And even if something were to go horribly wrong, resisting on turn meter drop, stuff like that, just having a combination of a control champion, in this case Achak, and or a burn champion like Mordecai, they should be able to finish it out on the second cycle, because once again, Spider will take a turn in between consuming all of the Spiderlings. So in this case, I did choose Achak because he's one of the best champions for this, because it is an AoE freeze, and he's not a damage dealing champion who's like stuns or something like that, so I don't have to worry about that. We also want to turn off other abilities that the cold hearts don't need to use, like their A2s. We don't want to do any AoE damage. Mordecai, we turn off his turn meter ability because we don't want him to reduce the Spiderlings turn meter, even though it would reduce the bosses as well. We want the Spiderlings to take as many turns as possible, so we don't want to do AoE turn meter reduction either. And just for fun, we can take a quick look at what the super endgame Spider can look like on hard mode. Stage 10 here will be the example, and you can see my super pay to win team, totally free to play team here. But we have a bunch of champions, and we'll kind of see them in action. I might run this a couple of times just so you guys understand what's going on here with this particular comp. But I've also done a different Spider comp that I used to use prior to this one. You can see it in the card up above, featuring a Kemptum as the main purveyor of that team. But in this case, there are definitely ways to make really fast compositions for even stage 10 on hard mode. So the main difference here between normal mode and hard mode is that we're going back to having to kill the Spiderlings primarily to deal damage. The Spider boss herself is immune to HP burn, so she won't take the ticks, but the Spider minions are not immune, so you can still burn the minions. However, every time you activate a burn, the main Spider will heal by 1%, and so HP burn does 3% health per tick, and so effectively you get only 2% of the burn because she heals a little bit of it back. The other thing to note here is that the Spiderlings are immune to freeze specifically, so an Achak, for example, wouldn't work, but if you wanted to stun them or something like that, that could still work. However, in this case, especially when you get to stage 10, the Spider is faster than the Spiderlings, so if she ever gets a first turn, you do not want any minions out there because she will heal, and she hits very hard at this level. Again, the main approach to the hard mode variation of Spider is to kill kill the spiderlings to deal damage. Every spider you kill deals enemy max HP damage to the spider boss herself. But in this case, we're doing a bit of a hybrid between HP burn activation as well as some AoE damage to kill the spiderlings. Let's go ahead and see this team in action as well. So you can see here, it looks like a poison comp, but it's also a mix of HP burn. In this case, we have Tomb Lord going first to make sure that he can place some poisons. Obviously, Calvalak's passive goes out there. So we stack up the poisons. We have an HP burner who has an HP burn who can't be resisted. We bring in Artak to activate it. We bring in Theodore to activate it. Then we bring in Calvalak's with the big nuke to kill all the remaining spiderlings. And then the boss just dies. 1, because we killed a bunch of spiderlings, and 2, because we activated a bunch of HP burns and poisons in this case because I do have Theodore. So once again, proving to you guys that Spider is most certainly the fastest dungeon if you have the champions to pull it off, even in the very, very end game. And if you are able to make an HP burn activation type team work, then you can really take advantage of this, specifically in like the turn attack tournaments, because this is going to be somewhere between 5 and 6 turns, depending on your team composition. So as promised, I'll take some time to run through the gearing of these champions featured in these compositions, starting from the bottom with the rares with Apothecary here. So if we take a look at his total stats, we can see here is pretty tanky, 52,000 on the HP, 2,200 on the defense, very fast, 255 on the speed. You don't necessarily need him that fast in the early game, but I do anticipate that he's going to be one of your faster champions on your team in the early game. I did crit cap him because his A2 can crit on the heal, which just makes it heal, I think, 50% instead of like 30%. And resistance is most certainly a bonus, more of an end game thing. You don't really need that. You can focus more just getting him fast enough for whatever your teams require at that stage. The sets were kind of just random what I had laying around. So a speed set, resilience set, and the crit rate set. I'll go ahead and say it now so I don't have to keep repeating myself in the future, but blessings are absolutely not mandatory on any of these champions. They are a bonus, but the compositions that I showed you will work entirely without blessings. But nonetheless, for something I was testing for a different video, I did put Miracle Heal on Apothecary. And if we take a quick look at his masteries here, you can see we come all the way down to Giant Slayer when it comes to the offense tree, focusing down that, and then getting a lot of the healing or support masteries, or healing masteries in the support tree. Next up, we have my starter champion, Kale, with his fancy dandy skin here. And he is in an endgame build. This is more for Doom Tower secret rooms where he has a stun set, because there are a lot of rooms that require rares only and stuff like that. So he is built like a nuker, so 30,000 on the HP, fairly low, 3,500 on the attack, 198 on the speed, full crit rate, and 203 crit damage, and then 225 on the accuracy, which is probably not enough for a lot of things. But for some of the easier rooms, I mean, we're not really depending on him to land the poisons anymore. It's more just about him doing damage and getting stuns off with the stun set. So I sacrificed accuracy in that regard. If we take a look at the masteries, it's completely different. Again, this is not how you're going to be building your starter champion. If it's Kale, you're probably going to come down to War Master on the offense tree, and that's where he's going to stay for the longest time while he's in your dungeon teams. But since I'm in the end game, I switched him over to Fearsome Presence because we want to get a higher chance to stun on the stun set. For his blessing, I did go with Phantom Touch because it does give him a chance to deal some extra bonus damage. Next up, we have Elhain, a very, very similar story, another rare repurposed for the end game in a stun set. Again, for Doom Tower hard secret rooms. So nuker as well on her, 30,000 on the HP, 4,000 on the attack, 225 on the speed, full crit rate, 164 on the crit damage. So really lacking there, but she is in crit rate gloves. I don't have enough gear to build everyone in crit damage gloves and put them in stun sets, stuff like that. So you just make do with what you can. Again, her primary purpose is to deal, or is to land the stuns, not necessarily to deal damage. So looking over at the masteries, pretty much just like Kale, probably going to be running War Master if you're running her in dungeons, or Helm Smasher if she's one of your arena nukers. She was definitely mine in the early game. I think actually she was my starter on this account, but I did build Kale as well eventually, but repurposed in the end game to Fearsome Presence, again, for the stun set, or a bonus chance to stun on the stun set. Same thing as Kale for the blessing, Phantom Touch for the extra chance at bonus damage. Next up, we have Reliquary Tender, definitely one of my favorite rares in the game for sure, and her super powerful Relentless set, life set as well to pair with that. If we take a look at her total stats, she is a support, so 60,000 on the HP, 2,700 on the defense, 240 on the speed, and then high resistance is what I opted to go. Again, high resistance is a luxury of the later game, so you don't necessarily have to focus that on your build. You just need her fast enough to do her job. But having resistance on your cleansers is useful because they can't cleanse if they're CC'd as well. So stuff like that, it's really good to incorporate resistance where you can. For the masteries, she is most certainly in a dungeon build. So we did come down here to War Master just for the extra hits on the A1 whenever she gets a turn. And then you can see here, I didn't even bother finishing out the T5, so it wasn't too important on her. We did make sure to get lasting gifts, but other than that, it wasn't really important. But if I was going to finish it out, I'd probably go with Spirit Haste, just give her more speed when people are dead so she can get back around to reviving them faster. But again, I didn't really find it that necessary. For her blessing, I actually went for Dark Resolve just because it has a chance to block freezes, which is notorious for the High Elves faction crypt. So every once in a while, 10% chance she just blocks the freeze that cannot be resisted in Faction War. So that's why I put that blessing on her. Moving right along, we have War Maiden. So one of the champions you should be getting in the early game, AoE decreased defense and whatnot. I did build her for damage, but also a bit of survivability. I believe she's in an HP percentage chest. So 37k on the HP, 2900 on the attack. Really low on the defense, but the base isn't that great to start with. 232, so pretty fast. Full crit rate, crit damage. Again, this is the luxury of the end or the later game. You don't necessarily have to build her for damage. She can hit decently for a rare, but really you need to focus on the speed and the accuracy to make sure that she can do her job in the early game. 263 on the accuracy there, and you can see here didn't really max out the chest. I don't really need her to survive, stuff like that. So for stuff like this, I just put them in whatever gear is available for the content at hand. I still use her in Faction Wars. She has enough accuracy for that, and she goes first on the team to make sure that she is landing decreased defense. No surprise on the Blessing Phantom Touch. Once again, I build that on basically all the rares who deal damage. And then for the masteries, kind of like Reliquary Tender, well, similar. We come down the offense tree ending on War Master. Again, this is more of a dungeon boss killing build, but we're going down the right hand side of the support tree this time towards all of the debuffing type masteries with Eagle Eye. You could go for Master Hexer and Sniper for the poison on the A1. You could. I didn't find that necessary once again because I don't use her everywhere anymore. So eventually I focused getting the masteries on champions who were better than her, epics and legendaries who have decreased defense, and there's where I opted to go to get all the tier 5 masteries. Next up we have Mr. Uncommon Armiger. He is in a destroy set, and that is for the Scarab King. I still do use him in that team. Also shout out to the refresh accessory, so every once in a while you get back-to-back A2s, which is kind of fun. But if we look at his total stats, he is built to nuke because he is an enemy max HP champion. 30k on the HP, 3200 on the defense, 198 on the speed, full crit rate, and 200 on the crit damage, and then 350 accuracy. Again, this is for Doom Tower hard level content, so to make sure that he can still reduce turn meter on the A1, even all the way up through Doom Tower hard. If you did not know, uncommons do not have access to blessings, so there is no option for that here. And if we go down to the masteries, what you'd probably expect, we're coming down the offense tree, ending on War Master. Some people can go Flawless Execution earlier in the game just to get more crit damage, so he hits a little bit harder. But I think more in the later end game, when you start to crit capping, like we talked about for stage 21 through 25, you don't really need the extra crit damage because it doesn't do anything. And so getting the extra damage from War Master is definitely the way to go once you start to hit that level of stage. And he doesn't place any debuffs, so we don't really care about the tier 5s here. Maybe Spirit Haste might be useful, but if he's the last person alive, you probably have bigger problems on your comp. So accuracy stuff on the right hand side, Evil Eye as well, Lore Steel, stuff like that. Next up we have Big Frankenstein here, Miscreated Monster, who I have in a shield set and a crit damage set. You could build him a lot of different ways. If you're more in the mid game, I would still opt more like the debuffer route, just focusing on the speed and the accuracy, but you probably do want some level of damage on him because he does scale the shield he places on his ability with the damage he deals. So if we take a look at his total stats, we have just under 70,000 on the HP, 1,700 on the defense, 219 on the speed, full crit rate, 234 on the crit damage, and then 214 on the accuracy, which is honestly quite low for what we're trying to do, but it's enough for stage 20 dungeon level stuff as far as that is concerned. The blessing I went with here is Crushing Rend, so a little bit of defense ignoring. Unfortunately, we can't use legendary blessings, so I'd probably pick something else if we could. And for the masteries, you can see we did not finish them. Didn't find it necessary on this champion. He does enough. Got the crit rate and the crit damage from the offense tree. Then I'll probably force myself to get down to Evil Eye just so he has that turn meter on the A1 and basically stopped after that. Next up, we have Tyrell in a nothing set. He's just in 6 random pieces of gear. So you can definitely tell who are my primary champions and who are my backup champions based on the quality of their builds. But Tyrell here, 32,000 on the HP, 3,600 on the defense, 231 on the speed. So again, fast because he is a debuffer, focusing on speed and accuracy. I did crit cap him because I can in the end game, full crit rate, 200 crit damage, and then 247 on the accuracy. For debuffers, epic and above, I typically go cruelty blessing because it helps them decrease defense even more than they already do, regardless of the stats on it not really matching a defense or support based champion. And then for the masteries, pretty standard debuffer route. We're hugging the right side of the support tree coming down to Sniper and Master Hexer, and hugging the left side of the offense tree coming down to War Master here at the end. Next up, we have Syl of the Drakes, the queen of carries in the early and the, or maybe not the early game, probably the mid game once you get her. So I do rock her still in a stun set, but I know Relentless is very, very popular if you can spare it. But for me, Relentless is very precious, so I don't want to waste it, use it on Syl of the Drakes. So I still rock her in a stun set. Granted, she is in a bare bones stun set because I've stolen a lot of gear from her over the years, but I digress. So 53,000 on the HP, 35 or 3,400 on the defense. She is a support champion, so we want her to be robust and tanky. 228 on the speed, and then 326 on the accuracy, skewing towards still being able to do some things in Doom Tower Hard, also with the also in the City of Centranos. I have no blessing on her, or at least she doesn't have any awakening stars, but I probably opt for Brimstone for majority of cases. Legendaries, especially your first few legendaries, if you have a 1-star blessing, you probably want to go Brimstone, provided they have enough accuracy to actually land it on bosses. It does do a lot of damage in the early game for sure. If we come down to masteries, we're kind of leaning into the fact that she's rocking the stun set, so we are coming down to Fearsome Presence and also making sure to get Harvest Despair to get that leech, and then getting a mix of turn meter boosting here from debuffs and buffs, because she does get she does place increased speed as well as placing the stuns and decrease speed, and getting Evil Eye as well, Sniper for the decreased speed on the A1, stuff like that. Next up, believe it or not, we have Renegade, who is 5-star. She's level 50 if you didn't catch that, in a shield set, even though it doesn't really do too much because she doesn't have barely any health. But nonetheless, I've not had a reason to 6-star her because typically she just needs to take her 1 turn, reset, and then die. So I don't really feel the need to 6-star her. So just keep that in mind. You don't necessarily need to 6-star a Renegade if you want her to function on your teams. So we can kind of skip over the HP defense because they're just low because she's not 6-starred. 199 on the speed, and then enough accuracy if I really need her to land the decreased speed on some of the dungeons. I didn't put much thought into her blessing. I just put Phantom Touch because if she happens to deal a little bit of bonus damage, it's kind of a bonus. It's quite rare that we get to look at both of my Cold Hearts in one video, pun intended, but nonetheless, I have my Scarab King one here in Destroy, just like with Armiger, and their stats are going to be fairly similar between these two, although Cold Heart 1 is a lot faster. But she's built to survive a little bit, 37 or 38,000 on the HP, quite low on the defense, 1600, 208 on the speed, 70 crit rate because that's all you need for the to crit cap the A3 Heartseeker, then 235 on the crit damage, and then 356 on the accuracy. Because this one is more of my accessory Cold Heart, I did opt to go for Hero Soul Blessing because if I have to run stage 20 for some reason, some sort of challenge tournament, she'll just do more damage for each of the Spiderlings alive. We'll see the difference in blessings on the other Cold Heart, but their masteries should be virtually identical. I still opt for Flawless Execution on her just because it gives her a little bit more crit damage. And I typically run them without debuffers on Spider 20 or no Spider 25 or whatever if I need to go back for a challenge tournament. And so having them crit or having high crit damage enough to not need a debuffer on the team is very helpful to them. So I still go Flawless Execution, but I can definitely see the argument for going Giant Slayer. She does have a quad hitter on the A1, so hitting all of those into one target can rack up a lot of damage, especially in the later end of the game. On the support tree, we are coming down to Evil Eye. Again, we do want that turn meter control every once in a while when a boss is susceptible to it. And Cold Heart number 1 is in a reflex set. This is more of my utility Cold Heart, just so that she can get around to Heartseeker as fast as possible. General purpose, I use her in Dark Fae, for example, stuff like that. But anywhere I just need a Cold Heart, she's my primary one. The second one, again, is for Scarab King. So 36k on the HP. 3,000, 3,200 on the attack, 1,600 on the defense, 250 on the speed, so pretty fast on this one. Again, the utility, I just want her to go quickly and do her Heartseeker when I need it. 70% crit rate again for the same reason, 223 on the crit damage, 353 on the accuracy for, again, Doom Tower hard level content, Dark Phase specifically. So like I said, because this is the utility build, we went Phantom Touch because every time she uses the A1, she just has a bunch of chances to get bonus damage. So it is just helpful to kill things a bit faster. For the masteries, like I said, they are identical between the Cold Hearts. So we come down to Flawless Execution, as well as coming down to Sniper and Evil Eye on the support tree. Next up, we have Mordecai, our Resident AoE HP burner, and I do have him in a reflex set. That is definitely an end game bonus. Again, he's just a debuffer, so you can focus on the speed and the accuracy if you're in the mid game progressing. Taking a look at his stats, we have just under 41,000 on the HP, just under 3,000 on the defense, 238, so pretty quick on the speed, and 348 on the accuracy. He is built to be able to do or land HP burns up to and through Doom Tower hard, specifically on the Nether Spider. He's definitely one of those champions that I did not put a ton of thought into the blessing, but I did go with Chainbreaker so that I eventually, if I get higher awakenings, I can get the bonus stat of some accuracy and some survivability. But also if he happens to get CC'd, it can kind of break him free. But that one's definitely more for the substats than the active ability of the blessing. So standard debuffer type masteries here, coming down to War Master on the offense tree, going down the debuffer route on the right hand side of the support tree, but also coming back to Cycle of Magic. So just in case, combining that with the reflex set, every once in a while he'll get he'll get back to the burn quicker because it is on a 4-turn cooldown on this specific champion. Next up, we have Achak the Wanderin, who is in a mix of random gear, resilience, and perception. So nothing specific. He's again one of those champions that used to be a staple on my teams, but now is kind of just thrown into content if and when I need him. But AoE freeze is still useful, and I did definitely re-gear him for the city of Centranos. So we take a look at his stats here. Another support champion, 53k on the HP, 3000 on the defense, 223 on the speed, so pretty quick, and then 376 on the accuracy. Again, rebuilt, repurposed for the city of Centranos just to make sure he has enough damage to actually, or enough accuracy to land the freeze on the waves and or the HP burn, depending on the enemy stats. But you can see here, all the gear's not even maxed. A lot of it's at level 12. So it's just whatever I could spare to put on him. It's not maxed out efficient gear. For the blessing, way back when he was on my spider team, kind of similar to the one I showed today, I went with cruelty because he does have he does have the AoE attack, and it just helps lower the defense of the main spider predominantly. As far as masteries are concerned, I went with Fearsome Presence because he does not have a 100% chance to land the freeze. I think it's a 90% chance, so this brings it up to 95% chance. And then I used to actually run him in a stun set when he was in my spider team, just in case every once in a while he wouldn't land the freeze, he might land the stun, so kind of combining those RNG elements together. Harvest Despair again for the leech, and then coming down the debuffer side of the support tree with the turn meter for the debuffs and buffs, because he does both. Evil Eye, Lore Steel, you get the idea. Moving on, next we have my Tomb Lord, who I've used for so long, one of my first legendaries on my entire account, who's carried me through so much content over the years, but I digress. He is in a resilience set, I think, and there's not much else just because I didn't really need it to force a set on him to get the stats. I did focus more on survivability. 52,000 on the HP, 3,200 on the attack, and then 2,500 on the defense, 256 on the speed, full crit rate because he does need to crit to place the maximum number of poisons on the A2, a little bit of crit damage at 142, and again, optimizing his accuracy 352 for Doom Tower hard and on the higher stages of the city of Centranos. No blessing on him. I've not gotten the star. I'd probably go with Brimstone if I had the option. And then on the mastery is kind of similar to, well, not exactly similar to Apothecary, but we are coming down to Giant Slayer because he does have a triple hitter on the A1, still hugging the left side of the offense tree, and then hugging the right side of the defense or the support tree with the debuffer style masteries, Master Hexer, but also coming down to Cycle of Magic. I used to have Lore Steel, but since he's not wearing like a real set, I didn't really see the point in doing that. I'd rather have a chance to decrease the cooldown of the A3, which is on a 4-turn cooldown. Moving right along, we have Walking Tomb Drang, who's in a Relentless and a Speed set, and he is built pretty tanky, lots of resistance as we will see, 65,000 on the HP, 3,000 on the defense, 252 on the speed, and then 498 on the resistance. So he is built to basically be immune to anything in PvE. I guess not including like Sand Devil and other things where it's really, really high requirements, but nonetheless, I did opt for a 1-star blessing on him with Intimidating Presence. I used to have Brimstone on him, but after they changed it to require accuracy, that was basically useless because we can see he has none 120. So I just changed it arbitrarily to Intimidating Presence. So whenever he's on a team, he boosts the aura of our team slightly more. Then looking at the masteries, we did make sure to come down to War Master. Again, this is more of a boss killing type build, but also I wanted to get Retribution on him because if he counterattacks and there's HP burn already out, then he has a chance to just run in and activate it on his A1, so that can be very strong free damage against your enemies. Next up, we have most people's favorite, arguably favorite daily or login reward champion. We have him in a really tough endgame build here, Perception and Stone Skin, 2-piece Stone Skin. You can check the stats out here. 80,000 on the HP, 2,400 on the defense, 246 on the speed, 431 on the resist, and 356 on the accuracy. So I want him to be powerful enough for hard mode dungeons to not really get debuffs on him, but also still have enough accuracy to land debuffs of his own. For the blessing, we opted for Brimstone, of course. And then for the masteries, we actually went with Oppressor on the support tree because him placing all the burns can give him a bit more turn meter fill rate, so he can cycle through quicker than some other champions on the team. We picked up a lot of the debuff for masteries here on the support tree, coming down to Master Hexer. Notably, I didn't want to go War Master because I do intend to use him in an Ice Golem hard team eventually, and you really don't want War Master in that fight because there's so much RNG and you might end up wiping your team by hitting a War Master proc at the wrong time. Similar to Walking Tomb Drang, we wanted to get a Retribution as well because if he does counterattack, he has a chance to extend a HP burns on his A1. It's an AoE, so that can be very, very strong. Again, free damage just by counterattacking. Rounding things out, we have my Calvlax here in a smattering of gear, cruel, crit damage, and perception. And he is definitely built to do his nuking job in the Spider's Den. We can see here 27,000 on the HP. We don't care about his survivability. 5.5k on the attack. Don't care about the defense. 229 on the speed, so fast enough to make sure that he gets a turn in Spider hard mode, as we saw. Full crit rate, 251 on the crit damage, and then 352 accuracy, again to ensure that he's able to land the poisons from his passive on the Spider in hard mode. For the blessing, I did opt for Soul Reap on him, and I did purchase up to 2-star. I do intend to get all the way to 3-star because there's even though you saw my team have that quick success, there are instances where he doesn't end up killing enough of the Spiderlings, and so I definitely want to get to at least 3 stars so that he has that 8% HP threshold to finish off those Spiderlings and or the boss if they get low enough. And the one thing to note here is that he is completely unbooked. So I could probably get more damage out of him just by doing this and booking out the A3. But as we already noted, there's a cap on enemy max HP, so I probably won't get much more out of it, which is why I still run him unbooked. We really care about his passive majority of the time. And for masteries, I did make sure to get down to Flawless Execution because he is enemy max HP scaling champion, even though it depends on the amount of poisons on the target, but nonetheless it's still enemy max HP type scaling, so we did come down to Flawless Execution. On the offense tree, a little bit of nuking masteries there, a little bit of a hybrid of nuker build as well as a enemy max HP build, and then coming down the debuffer side of the house here with ending on Sniper and Master Hexer to extend the duration of the poisons. And also I think his A1 can increase the duration of poisons. It's not 100% chance, so Sniper can help with that. And lastly, we do have my cracked out Theodore with a 4-star blessing. We'll see that it is Brimstone. So we look at his build here, 65,000 on the HP, 3,200 on the defense, or 3,300 almost, 242 on the speed, very, very fast, 458 on the resistance, kind of similar to Artak, same logic. We don't really want him to take debuffs. We want him to be resilient enough to keep cycling through his poisons and AoE poison activation, as well as HP burn activation. And lastly, 375 on the accuracy. As I hinted at, Brimstone, we got lucky enough to get a 4-star soul on him, so Brimstone is definitely the way to go. And then on the masteries, just like Artak, we do have the Oppressor mastery here so that he goes faster or fills his turn meter faster due to all of the poisons he places out. In addition to that, we are picking up Master Hexer to extend the duration of that, Lore of Steel, stuff like that to incorporate, and didn't really need to finish the rest of the masteries here. the main thing I wanted here was oppressor in the support tree. All right, so that is going to do it for our deep dive into the Spider's Den progression through the early game, mid game, all the way into the late game, end game, if you choose to go that far. Stay tuned for parts 3 and 4 of the Dungeon Deep Dive series, where we're going to look at Ice Golem next, as well as Fire Knight. And I do also plan to touch on Demon Lord Clan Boss as well. But if you guys want to deep dive on any of the other sections of the game, particularly from the early mid game experience, then let me know in the comment section down below, and I can add that to the queue of planned videos. As always, if you found this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to hit the subscribe button down below as well for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.